Hello everyone. Many thanks for joining me today to discuss on how to avoid risk of inaction in IoT security while having a return on investment from activities that should be performed in this domain. I'll try to keep the discussion general, but we may discuss after the presentation or later about specific cases. Just feel free to connect with me over LinkedIn or contact me by email at any time. IoT may impact personal security, financial security, health and well-being, company security, and many more. This impact may be seen from a psychological and a market perspective. In both cases, what we should all probably bear in mind is that our end user is a human being. Some may argue that we are having machine-to-machine interactions or that an IoT device may be used on an animal or plant or building or some other type of device. But in all cases, the end user of these devices is the human. And this is why their security has a paramount importance. Let us take, for example, this plane cockpit. It is a very complex environment that puts together information from thousands of sensors. Some of this info is used by other machines, some by the pilots, some by the control towers, and so on. But at the end of the entire information life cycle, it is the passenger, or at least the people owning the goods transported by the plane. And if something happens with any of these devices in this complex ecosystem, safety and security of people might be very well in danger, or at least losses with their properties may occur. Bruce Schneier writes in his great paper on the psychology of security that security is both a feeling and a reality, and they are not the same. Our brain is built based on experiences of our ancestors across the past thousands of years. However, the human brain did definitely not have time to adapt to the cyber world. Our developed perception capabilities in the cyber world are equal to none. Human senses such as taste, touch, proprioception, sight, hearing, smell are not made for the cyber world. In order to have a feeling of cyber threats, we must create a matching reality that is based on our ingrained needs of security, whether they are personal, emotional, financial, or health-based. And this is a truly difficult effort. Most individuals on this planet do not have any knowledge or awareness to even draft a cybersecurity reality. And this reality looks, unfortunately, quite scary. This map here from Kaspersky depicts the cyber attacks happening in a fraction of a second worldwide, here with focus on Germany. In this country alone, the average number of cyber attacks happening daily equals the number of criminal offenses in the physical world happening in a year. How many of us feel this reality? Probably a very tiny bit of the population. Generally, those being aware of the cybersec. All the rest is not doing much about it. Let me stress this more by using the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Its second tier is on safety needs. It includes personal security, emotional security, financial security, health and well-being, safety needs against accidents, illness, and many adverse impacts. But if someone would ask you if cybersecurity would belong to these basic needs, what would you answer? What if the question would be extended to the context of the company that you work for or you own? Would you place this among the basic needs of a self? What about the products that you are using? Let's take, for example, cars, phones, toys for your children, gadgets, useful or less useful, and so on. According to studies about human behavior and information technology, the perception of information security is way behind many other factors, such as user experience or UX, availability, functionality, correctness, or interoperability. Based on analysis from Nick Fisher, most of these value criteria are so-called dissatisfiers. That means people just expect them to be there, and they are not happy when they aren't, or they are at least concerned when they are lacking. Then there are the satisfiers or motivators, where people don't really see it as a need, but are happy when these elements are there. Information security, however, is considered by the users a delighter. It usually leads to a surplus of satisfaction when fulfilled, but is generally unexpected or unrequired by the user. It is not even latently present as a value criteria. Among all these criteria presented here, the smallest fraction of people consider information security paramount when choosing a product. Whether you are producing or only deploying IoT devices, this reality probably mirrors the situation with the decision makers in your company too. The issue is that the people taking the decisions for the investment in IoT security are usually less familiar and have less understanding for the existing threat potentials. Thus, what they need to learn, or at least be learned, might be what could be the human or financial impact of these threats, and for how long could they have an effect? What is the level of severity, the personal harm, and the seriousness of consequences to people or businesses outside the own organization? What could be the probability that this would happen? Here, I would stress the idea that there is always an important distinction between probable and possible. What is their awareness on these issues? What is the possible immediacy of attack and their negative effects? How are they made aware that they are also personally responsible and exposed? Given these perspectives, we can safely say that the risk of inaction is quite high. The IoT security is not perceived as a basic need by the end users. Its reality is definitely not felt by our native senses. And the impact of not having secure devices is mostly perceived ex post, sometimes when it is too late. From the economic perspective, this risk of inaction is the risk of lacking cybersecurity. And this must be understood by everyone. This is why a question from the tech journalist Paul Gillen on what is ROI fits very well for the topic we are discussing now. When we say ROI, do we mean return on investment or risk of inaction? I believe they are both strongly intertwined. Until now, we took a look why the risk of inaction is strongly bound mainly with our psychological limitation. Now, let us look to the economic part and see if we could balance this risk for return on investment when securing the IoT devices. In investment in IoT security, the question is this a useless burden of cash, or it is rather a much needed trade-off? Most of the companies are caught between market forces and dilemmas that dwarf many intentions to secure themselves or their products. So why should they do it? Some do it just because it's a regulatory requirement. Critical industries such as healthcare, energy, food have to do it because the law or regulation imposes it. My belief is that everyone should do it, just because in the IoT world we are having, there are a lot of IoT devices generating a huge global attack surface. And this global attack surface is a danger for all of us. Your opponents or the opponents of your customers may be anywhere. Their action to attack your IoT devices are meant to increase their return on investment. Thus, you may not be able to thwart the most singularly determined opponent for whom cost is no object, and they could find for sure a way to attack successfully you. But you definitely can make other targets more attractive than you are. And let me explain this better with this diagram. With its help, I want you to visualize better the trade-off between losses and gains in securing the IoT devices, and generally the information systems. On the left side, we are having the cumulative number of threats worldwide. Unlike the physical world, the digital world, as we have seen, has an attack surface spread on the entire planet. And these apply to each of the IoT devices that you may produce or deploy. Dangers come usually especially from highly automated attack processes, and they are manifold. They increase exponentially with the number of each IoT device coming into the network. That is also with the ones deployed or manufactured by your organization. On the right side of this graph, we are having the level of the threat capability attacking your devices. The higher the level of capability, the less the number of possible threats. These threats and their capabilities are able to trigger different level of losses to you. Now, the question is, what is your risk appetite to accept these potential losses? Here in red. If you would shift the orange risk appetite vertical bar to the left, then your investments in securing the IoT devices are consequently lower. See for that this yellow square here, representing the level of investment. But in this case, the accepted possible loss from cyber attacks would increase too. Now, the logic applies, of course, when shifting the orange bar towards right. In that case, we have less possible risk, but higher investment. You just need to find the right level of investment, depending on your needs and those of your market or of your customers. Depending if you are deploying or only manufacturing the IoT devices, there are different approaches and perspectives too. When you just deploy the IoT devices, then you might consider only factors such as the severity of the risk, the probability of the risk, the magnitude of the cost, or how effective the countermeasures are at mitigating the risk. So these may be your criteria for the risk appetite. When it is your customer or the customer of your customer, and so on in the supply chain, who is using these IoT devices, many other factors influence the cost function. Among them, I would mention the market demand and profitability, the marginal revenue functions, economies of scale and scope, the agency problem and security-based incentives, bureaucracy, regulations, and many more. In both situations, we are having a suite of loss types which apply to everyone. And the return on investment is mainly given through the reduction of the risk borne out of these types of losses. By the way, I found this list created by Jones and Freund very concise and comprehensive. I will give for each of them an example, but I let you imagine what could that be in the case of your organization. Productivity costs are, for example, when your manufacturing line is not working anymore due to a network of IoT sensors that has been successfully attacked. Replacement costs may occur, for example, when you need to replace product with having quality issues manufactured during a successful attack. Competitivity loss could be triggered by the loss of brand reputation or due to a sudden sink into productivity or something else. Answer costs are generated by the need to understand what happened and, of course, the obligation to get back into the regular business. You may have to pay penalties in the markets where you are selling your IoT devices or to your customers who are using them and have issues due to a successful attack. Brand reputation can be affected if your products have been successfully hacked and generated losses to one, multiple, or even all your customers. By assessing and improving the IoT security, companies can truly shift from risk of inaction to return on investment. The responsibility for creation of perception and reality of cybersecurity must be in the hands of organizations creating or deploying IoT devices. This may be governments, NGOs, associations, but most probably and most importantly, public and private companies. These IoT devices are employed by people, and they are supporting services or products used by humans and other beings. Their usage must be considered from their very first second of existence and until even beyond the time they are taken out of life. From an ethics perspective, we may say it is rather an opportunity for action. Once the responsibility is acknowledged by us and by the decision maker, the main question for every company becomes then, how much should we invest in such an endeavor? And what is the return on investment out of it? The answer to it can come only if due diligence is executed and management commits to the so necessary due care. This is a deliberate act, however. But since we are all living in a deeply digital world, it becomes a must, whether dictated by regulation, sustainable thought, or market forces. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be very happy to discuss with you on these topics further now.